Welcome to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. Comment is the big conversation, the great debate, but it can only be either of those if you join in. That's why, above all, I need your telephone calls. The number to dial is 44208-601-4555. You call us, we'll call you back, establish a clear line, and remember, if you get on the television with me, the volume on your television has to be down at 0 or no one will understand either of us, and I'll have to move swiftly on. You can also SMS the show, and the best of those will come up here on the comment wall. The number, that number is 4478-00008066, or you can email me. Ditto comes up on the comment wall, and the email address is comment@presstv.co.uk. This being the 21st century, you can also tweet me at comment_PressTV. It has been a truly momentous week. A massacre took place in Peshawar in Pakistan at the hands of the kind of Takfiri lunatic fanatics who are laying waste to much of the Muslim world. But that crime was particularly heinous given that it involved the attempt to murder hundreds of small children and succeeded in murdering almost 200 of them. Small children in their school uniforms, sitting at their desks, and people shouting the name of God, massacring them. You really could not make that up, even in the annals of the recent history of this Takfiri monster. And a big question, which I've dealt with in my hashtag Ask Galloway segment, which will be coming up over the next couple of days, is when are we going to do something about the fountainhead of this extremism, the spring, the well from which it comes. You all know, I think, what that spring is and where it is. It's also been a momentous week on the Palestinian track. Hamas were taken off the terrorist list by the European Union, and the European Parliament voted overwhelmingly to recognize the state of Palestine, one of a whole series of parliaments doing the same thing. Netanyahu was going nuts about it, throwing his toys out of the pram, which hopefully will have made his position even worse with the European countries he was insulting, in fact, libeling, blood libeling, for those of us who stood up to fascism and Hitlerism and defeated it. It's a bit much to be accused of being a part of it. And, of course, the biggest news that anybody ever imagined that they would hear on the Latin American track emerged yesterday. I nearly fell off my chair when I saw the news flash that President Obama was resuming normal, friendly, diplomatic relations with Cuba, that the two countries would open embassies in each other's capitals, and that the 50-year embargo on Cuba would be lifted. That's if the Congress can be persuaded, although the President has considerable leeway in that regard. In any case, prisoners were exchanged. It was a great victory for the Cuban people, a great victory for the Cuban Revolution, a great victory for the leaders, Fidel Castro, and the now president, his brother, Raul Castro. It was a victory for the memory of Che Guevara and Camilo Cienfuegos and all the great revolutionary heroes and martyrs, because it showed that if you behave with dignity, if you respect yourself, ultimately others will have to respect you. And therefore my question tonight, does it pay off to stand up to the West? Well, I'm absolutely certain that it does. First of all, what use is an undignified life in any case? If you don't stand up to the West, you lie down for the West. And what kind of life would that be? But countries which are standing up to the West are winning. Cuba is the latest example. Iran was the last example. They tried to bully and browbeat and blackmail and sanction Iran into giving up its inalienable right to develop peaceful nuclear power. They have failed in that. They are having to deal with Iran with a new respect because Iran respected itself and stood up to them. Russia is another country which is standing up to the West. The West is doing all it can to damage them. In the short term, they have damaged them, but Russia will be back. And one thing you can guarantee, President Putin will not bend the knee to the United States any more than the Iranian leadership did, any more than the Cuban leadership did. And there's a lesson for others in this, particularly in Ramallah. If the Palestinian Authority would stand up with self-respect and dignity to the US's bullying in relation to the settler state that they call Israel, believe me, it would pay off. Ali is in the United States. He's the first call of the evening. Ali, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. George. How are you doing?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Nice to hear from you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting topic you chose, and I think, standing up to imperialism with honesty and with full strength has always paid back. And, we have read in the stories, but we are seeing with our eyes that how if your thoughts and your point is strong, and if you stand up to imperialism, this would pay you.
Well, it pays, Ali, either now or in the other life. I mean, I don't know if my long stand against imperialism will ever pay in the sense of final victory. But I hope and pray that it will pay on the judgment day, that I did the right thing. And so, even if it doesn't pay off now, it's still the right thing to do. But in the case of Cuba, Iran, it has already paid off now. If Iran had bowed the knee to the United States diktat, it wouldn't have a nuclear power industry at all. In fact, if Iran had not risen up against the puppet Shah, as he called himself, then the people of Iran would still have an undignified life. Cuba has been invaded, subverted, in every way compromised. A total embargo for more than half a century has left its people impoverished in a financial sense, though they're far from impoverished in other senses. And now, President Obama has had to accept that the policy of embargo, invasion, subversion, assassination, terrorism, blockade have all failed. And everyone in the world can see that they failed. And everyone in the world can see that Cuba has prevailed. Ali, how's the news going down in the U.S.?
I think this is a great news for all truth seekers, for all who are honest, for all who want dignity in their life. I have talked to many of my friends here. Everybody is so happy, But again, Mr. George, with these policies, what the loss which, as you're very true, maybe it would not be paid here, but it would, all these imperialistic policies would cause loss to the general population, to the innocent peoples, and it has done. But again, definitely, if you are strong and if you want a dignified life, and if you stood up to imperialism, it would pay you. I wanted to give you one more example. I think having nuclear energy and nuclear power, I think it doesn't matter a lot. Look at my country, my own country, Pakistan, who is a nuclear power. But look on the leaders; they don't have any dignity. And how the
that's right, Ali. I made the point earlier on. If you don't respect yourself, Why would anybody else respect you? Ali, you're in the US. Let's go further north to Canada, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and talk to our old friend, the sage, Gary. Go ahead, Gary.
Good evening, George.
Good evening.
The answer to your question tonight is a resolute yes, 1,000 times yes. All the examples you have raised, it proves the point over and over again. But I'd like to make a few extra points in this case about Canada, because of course Canada was involved in facilitating the negotiation stream that went on behind the scenes.
Yep.
8 meetings were held in Canada, 7 of them in Ottawa, the capital, 1 in Toronto, the financial capital. And the Globe and Mail, a leading newspaper in this country, had the temerity today to report that this is what sealed the deal, that Canada was so silent and secretive, as was expected of a facilitator. Of course, to Canadians, we also know about the silence and secrecy of the Harper regime, about its real intentions towards the incomes and future of the people of this country. So, of course, it was a very appropriate third man that the Cubans and the Americans agreed on. The Cubans have their experience of Canada. They're not fooled. They know exactly what they're dealing with, to the point, as many listeners may be aware, that several Canadian businessmen who have been trying to cheat the Cuban government and corrupt the Cuban officials they were working with, several of these individuals were hauled into court, convicted, and are now serving lengthy prison sentences, some of which they may end up being able to serve back in Canada. But the point is, no matter how accommodating or no matter how pro-imperialist, the Cubans prevailed by sticking to their issue. And this latest development with Cuba was also a huge victory for the struggle to free the Cuban Five. As listeners may be aware, the last 3 of the Cuban Five were sprung and returned to Cuba as part of this deal. The situation with Cuba it's extremely important to remember the circumstances which hastened this. Basically, starting from the famous handshake at the funeral rites in South Africa for Nelson Mandela, the handshake between Raul Castro and Obama, and it was really from that point that everything moved along.
Indeed. Hallelujah. And the Pope played an excellent role also. Canada has long had good relations with Cuba. Even the right-wing government of Harper has not tried to end those good relations. And that's to his credit. There are not many other things I could say or would say to the credit of the Harper government in Canada. But insofar as they did help bring about the end of a conflict of more than 50 years, then I think we should congratulate them. Gary, in Halifax, as always, talking with the wisdom that comes from a man who has been involved in campaigning on these issues for many, many years. Let's talk to Jacob in London, another wise man, if I recall. Jacob, welcome.
Thank you very much for your kind words. Thank you very much for being there. You're a fantastic guy. I don't know how the world could have been, have any way of seeing itself as being saved without people like you. Thank you so much for being there.
Thank you.
I want to very quickly say about why U.S. has taken the Cuba off its sanction list, which was initially a surprise to me, but not within minutes, not such a surprise, because America just wants to gain a friend. It wants to wash its dirty hand with this friend. Cuba was discriminated against for over half a century. Its population subjugated, impoverished, killed, dehumanized, and now Cuba is being used as a clean water to wash the dirty hand of USA. But why now? Because USA has come under huge criticism for the impoverishment that is causing to Russia by this trade embargo they're imposing on Russia, by the trade embargo they've imposed in Iran for many, many years. And it is incredibly stupid, but this is what America is doing. So America took Cuba off their sanction list in order to gain a friend, say, look, we're not really bad, we're not that bad. So now Cuba is being used in order to clean the dirty hand of the American, American so-called sanctions. Now, why did America impose these sanctions against Russia? Simply because President Putin agreed to help the people of Crimea who begged Putin to help them.
Who are Russians?
Yes, I mean, the reason President Putin is being hated so much is simply because he agreed to people of Crimea when they begged Putin and they voted to join Russia, which is actually a part of Russia, from very beginning.
Yeah.
So Putin agreed with that, and that has really created a huge problem for America because obviously Crimea is a very important port as well for the Russian Navy. So America now knows that they have they have been snookered as far as that plan had been concerned. And whatever America cannot invade, whatever country they cannot invade to kill or even cultivate the heroin crops of that country like they've been doing in Afghanistan for the past 1 decade, then they say, okay, we're going to impose what is, they call it sanction, but it's really a trade embargo.
Yeah.
This is an act of war.
It's an act of war, yeah.
It is an act of war, and this is the reason that America has taken the Cuba off. But it's a signal that America is losing its power. America is losing its power because it's going around saying we're going to put sanction on these people, we're going to sanction on these people, that people. Next they're going to be putting sanction on China. Next they're going to put in sanction on their own people. It's incredibly stupid. I
don't think they'll put sanctions on China, Jacob, because China could destroy their economy overnight. China is now the biggest economy in the world, 6 years before it was expected to become so. China holds more dollars than the US Treasury holds. And if China simply moved its assets and exchanged its currency for another, then the United States economy would be bankrupt. So I don't think they're going to impose sanctions upon China, but they have done, and for the reasons you say, against Russia. But that will not work. They have sanctions, and that's played a part in Russia's recent troubles with the value of its currency, which is halved, but also the very low oil price of now below $60 a barrel, which has been brought about by the complicity of the Saudi regime within OPEC. They are trying to keep the oil price as low as possible to harm the Russian economy, to punish Russia for standing by the Russian people of the eastern part of Ukraine. It's not just Crimea. Crimea, in a way, is a done deal. It's the people in the eastern Ukraine who are Russian people who cannot accept the fascist coup which took place in Kiev. And they are trying to punish Russia by sanctions and by a collapsing oil price. But neither of these two things will persist. Neither will succeed. President Putin is not becoming less popular as a result of his stand against the West. He's becoming more popular. And of course, we're in a world where everyone can have other friends. Russia and China have become closer and closer allies as a result of Western hostility towards Russia. Iran has survived the era of sanctions and is now beginning to come out of those. Cuba has survived this embargo, total embargo of more than half a century, and has not just survived, but its luster, its luminosity, its the love for it around the world has never, ever been higher. I'm looking at these pictures as I speak of the Cuban leadership, Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, and so on. These are fantastic people and regarded as icons around the world. And so who's the loser in all of this? Even Obama himself said, President Obama himself said to the dissident voices in Congress, he said, look, we've tried your policy for more than half a century, and it's a failure, and everybody can see it. Aidan is in London, another wise man. Aidan, welcome.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me back. God bless you.
Thank you, brother. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's about taking a dignified stand against the West. You've mentioned Cuba, Putin, Iran, and there's another country sort of in the making. I know it's a bit funny at the moment, but President Erdogan of Turkey this week turned round and took a dignified stand against the EU, if I'm not wrong. Hear me out here. Well, he turned around and said to the EU, "Why are you meddling in my internal affairs if you don't know what's going on?" I mean, the reason why he turned around and said that is the EU are really, really quick to jump on any time there's a situation going on in Turkey, whether they know the situation or not. But the Turkish presidency and a lot of people in Turkey and around the world are really, really angry at the way the EU stayed completely silent when there was a military coup in Egypt. So why didn't they interfere in that? Why didn't they say something about that? Why did they stay completely silent when...
Because they're hypocrites. They're hypocrites. Right. They didn't just stay silent about the military coup in Cairo. They supported it. They are continuing to, through their allies, principally the UAE and Saudi Arabia, fund the Sisi dictatorship in Egypt. This is in accordance with Western policy. The military aid from the United States, which was supposed to be being cut, has not been cut, and the Egyptian military are back in top dog position in the country. They have revived their economic as well as security role. They own banks, hotels, farms, factories, shops. The military junta in Cairo is ruling with the absolute support of Western countries, and it is torturing and murdering its opponents, torturing and murdering the people who say democracy should prevail. So you're right, I hold no candle, fly no flag for Erdogan, as you know, but he's right to say, you are just hypocrites. You want to lecture us on democracy while you supported the drowning in blood of democracy in Egypt. Aidan, thanks a lot. David in France, it's your call. Go ahead.
Yeah, I will. He's still talking.
Go on, David. Turn your television down.
Oh, no.
David, you're on the air.
Hello, George.
Hello, sir. Go ahead.
Yes. First of all, I would like to congratulate you on your program.
Thank you.
It's good to hear somebody to say it as it really is.
Thank you.
And also, the good news about Cuba. I never thought it would happen.
No, I certainly didn't expect it yesterday, David, I must say.
Yeah, and as I say, wonders never cease. Let's hope it won't be too long before they do the same with Russia. Yes,
I mean, I think that the lesson of Cuba is that you have to in any case. What's the alternative to standing up, David? It's lying down. And
yes,
what kind
right.
of a dignified leader would lie down for others, would lie down and be stood on like a doormat?
I couldn't agree. You speak as I think. You do very well. But I can do that with some authority because I've just got back from Russia. I've travelled across Russia in the autumn on the Trans-Siberian Express.
Oh, lucky you. I'd like to do that.
Yeah, I bet you would. And also, I've got 2 Russian grandchildren, so I do know a bit more about Russia than all these hypocrites in the West that accept all they're told on the Western media do. I mean, I've always, well, not just for the reasons that I've just told you, but I've always supported Russia because I think there's always been this antagonism, and you know the details, and
yeah.
I won't involve too much on your program.
I need to go now, David, for a short break, but thanks, and you and me both on all the points that you made. Great call. Thanks for that. I have to take a 3-minute break, that's all, for a short news bulletin. We're asking, does it pay to stand up to the West? I'll be back after that news bulletin, God willing, in just 3 minutes' time. So don't go away. Welcome back to Comment with me, George Galloway, here on Press TV, still the voice of the voiceless. I need your calls, your SMS, your emails, and your tweets. We're asking, does it pay off to stand up to the West? Irfan is in London. He's got a point of view. We better hear it. Irfan, welcome to the show.
Hello there. Hi.
Yes, hello, sir. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make the point that we've seen noble examples of resistance, of standing up to the prevailing orthodoxy, which Dr. Johnson called the grimmest dictatorship of them all, in
Indeed.
the form of Cuba.
One of my favorite quotes.
In the form of Cuba, in the form of Venezuela, in the form of President Assad, not until long ago, in the form of many courageous resistance movements. And the one thing I wanted to say was the complete sort of supineness and the sort of lack of backbone of these Arab tyrannies, these Gulf tyrannies, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE. They've got all the wealth in the world. They've got masses of riches and gold and oil and whatever. And yet they're spineless. They have nothing. They stand up for no values. They have no case to be made, and they're a doormat for the Western powers. They completely succumb, and they completely sort of give themselves up and sell themselves out, as it were.
You identified one there, and I'm about to make a broadcast through my one of the vodcasts that I do through Malacca Media on the United Arab Emirates. I'm wearing a watch, as I always do, given to me by the former ruler of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Zayed. May God have mercy upon him. He was, although an unelected leader, he was a real class act. He stood up for values of Arab nationalism, values of his religion, Islam. But he's been replaced by his sons who rule their country in an entirely different way, who have rented their country out, rented it out to Tony Blair, to the Sisi dictatorship in Egypt, to the United States. They're ready to do anything. They have no values of any kind, and yet they have undreamt of all the riches of Croesus. No one could touch them. No one could harm them if they could only find that backbone that you have identified as missing. You can see a shiver running along these Arab regimes, looking for a spine to run up. Irfan, great call. Thanks for it. That was Irfan in London, in his view on whether or not it pays to stand up to the West. Saidi is on the line in the north of Ireland. We better hear him. Saidi, welcome.
Hello, George. How are you?
By the grace of God, I'm good. Thanks for calling.
May peace be with you. I just want to talk about the Russia.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Saidi, have we lost you? Just as we put up Russia on the screen. I'm so happy to get a call from the north of Ireland, I must say. And I hope Saidi can get back to us. But Robert is on the line in Scotland. He's the wisest 15-year-old in history. Robert, welcome.
Hello, George.
Nice to hear from you. Go ahead.
Nice to hear from you as well. I'd like to say that it actually does pay to stand up to the West, and having a balanced scale of power in the world is completely and utterly crucial.
Yes.
So that one side can't go around declaring itself the world police, as America did a decade ago in the wake of quite possibly the most brutal and most horrific act of terrorism that has ever been seen on American soil. They use that as an excuse to go and act as a world police around the globe, telling other countries what they can and cannot do. With regards to Palestine, I'm glad that the European Union could see reason and finally stopped being the United States government's stooge.
Yeah.
Hamas is not a terrorist organization, and it never has been. They are the legal and democratically elected political representation of the people of Gaza, who have had no representation from Mahmoud Abbas. Like yourself, though, I'm not a supporter of Hamas. I don't think that the way they are ruling Gaza is correct, but with regards to their guerrilla activity in the defence of their country earlier this year in August, when their children were being butchered on the beaches and on the streets from the sky, and they were being gassed. They had every single legal right to defend their homes, to defend their children, to defend their families, and to defend their country.
I mean, I agree with every word of that, Robert. Thanks very much indeed for that call. Well, we're getting around the world. We've been in the north of Ireland briefly. We've been in Scotland. We've been in England. We've been in Canada. We've been in the United States. Where are we going next? That's the big question. It's to John in Spain. John, welcome.
Hi, Robin. How are you?
Go ahead, John.
Right. I just want to tell you thank you for your program.
Okay, thanks.
Because the only first thing when I want to talk about your two programs, when you come up to it, the first one in the Cuba issue.
Yeah.
The Cuba issue to leave the Cuba blockade. The things what I'm trying to say inside there is some way of political of things in the world. You know, the Americans, they were trying always to find the way of the people of the islands of Russia to put them down. That's the way they were trying to find this way in Cuba, because they know the Cuba people with link with the Russian people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the first thing. I go to the Palestinian issue when they were trying to do the Palestinian state. The Palestinian state, if they are thinking what is going on in the world, all of we know the American people, the American great country is a superworld power in the world. In my own view, I think America is not the superworld power, because they don't have all the rights in the world to say this country don't right to do this country don't right to do that. Because the Israeli people been trying to put the Hamas population in the terrorist list. In terrorism, when we are thinking about the war, we all know terrorist is somebody who will go and fight another country. But the Hamas people always find their way in the country to secure their position.
Well, that's right.
And to secure their homeland.
You cannot possibly be described as a terrorist when you are fighting on your own land against others who have occupied it. That's simply an absurdity. And of course, long before Hamas was ever created, these were exactly the words, the allegations, the smears that they used against any Palestinian resistance, however secular, however leftist, however Islamic, it was all the same. Arafat was a terrorist to them. The Hamas is only 30 years old. For 60 years, they've been describing the Palestinian resistance as terrorists. It wouldn't matter who was the leader of the Palestinian people. The Zionist propagandists would still describe them as terrorists and try to persuade others that they are terrorists. But of course, that is fast running out of traction. This is the point, John. You're in Spain, where the Spanish Parliament has just voted recognition of Palestine. The Irish Parliament last week voted unanimously. Not a single parliamentarian in Ireland voted against recognition of Palestine. Sweden and France and even Britain, the land of Balfour, and others are all one after the other voting in recognition of the Palestinian state. Netanyahu is fast running out of defenders. And the more quickly he runs out of those defenders, the more vicious is the venom of the apologists and defenders of the indefensible. But we are winning, John. That much is clear. Let's go to London. Sepeter, I think. I can't. Setter. Go ahead, please.
Hi, how you doing, Mr. Galloway? Hope you're all good.
I'm well, and I'm sorry I mispronounced your name. Go ahead, sir.
That's absolutely fine. It is an ancient Persian name.
All right. I'm not familiar with those. Thanks very much.
No worries. Back to the subject of tonight, basically. Yeah. I'm starting on the resistance, and particularly because I'm from Iranian descent, I've got quite a passionate view with regards to, resistance my own country against the West, and I really think, to be honest with you, society in Iran is getting to a point where they are realizing that resistance is the only way forward, because the Western powers are just not having any positive attitude or emotions towards the Islamic world or Iran in particular. And to be honest with you, the way the Iranian government are behind the resistance all throughout the Middle East, I think it is a positive move, and it should be supported by other allies of those countries, and also the international community. And as I said, the main subject will go back to Palestine and the freedom of people of Palestine who have been sort of barbarically, forced in their own land to live as second or even third-class citizens at some point, and
probably fourth, actually, probably fourth class now. Listen, that was an excellent contribution, and I'm really grateful for it. Just imagine this. If the Arab regimes were like the government of Iran, dignified, independent, sovereign, and determined, what a different world we'd be in. If Saudi Arabia had a government like the dignified government of Iran, imagine the difference in world affairs that would represent. If such a change happened in Saudi Arabia, then countries like the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait would simply not be able to stand against it. So you'd have a united Persian Gulf with all that oil, all that gas, all that strategic importance. Can you imagine if the Syrian and Iraqi Baathists, who are supposed to have stood for Arab unity, had managed to unite under the same party their two countries, with the Baath party, Arab nationalism, ruling from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean across two vital countries? Can you imagine if Egypt had a dignified government instead of a tin pot military dictator? Can you imagine if the Arab world, from the Atlantic to the Persian Gulf, 350 million people, had dignified governments, had governments that insisted upon their independence and sovereignty, just like Cuba, just like Iran, just like Russia? Can you imagine the different world that we'd be in? Keep that vision in front of yourselves, because that's what we have to strive for, and one day, God willing, we'll get it. Let's go to Double in Cameroon. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, George.
Yes,
nice
welcome. Welcome to the show.
Yes. I'll first of all like to comment on the thaw in relations between Cuba and the United States, as announced yesterday by President Obama. I understand there's some little bit of excitement, but I'm a little bit more pessimistic about the plan, for the simple reason that the United States has actually failed, and they've seen the rise of the Latin American nations getting together now to form a much more stronger force against imperialism. Then, given Cuba's position and history of resistance against the United States, I am afraid I'm a lot more pessimistic than I was before, for the simple reason that now that there's going to be a fall in relations, we'll now see American banks creeping in, NGOs creeping in, and that's where subversion would start. And maybe in the medium term, we might start seeing fissures getting into Cuban society and Cuban economy, because these are usually organizations and enterprises that just basically come to overturn a functioning system.
Well, Dobbo, as George Bush might put it, you're misunderestimating the Cuban leadership. I promise you, none of those things will ever happen. Thanks for the call, though. I don't often get calls from Cameroon, and I really like it when I do. Abu Sisi is in the Netherlands. Let's hear from him. Go ahead, sir. Yes, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum to you. Thanks.
Walaikum salam. Thanks very much. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the lifting of Cuban sanction by the American government.
Yeah.
Yeah. Few months back, I was following the news in RT that the Russian government want to reopening their military base in Cuba.
Yeah.
So I don't know, perhaps America has missed that box. So now the only way that they can do, because they have Cuba on sanction list, they know they cannot retaliate against that. So now they say, okay, we're going to lift this sanction so that we can get a way to stop that happening. And that's what I'm seeing in this particular situation, that they are trying to get Cuba so that they can stop Russia for reopening the military base.
Well, look, Abu Sisi, first of all, you're overestimating the importance of the military base to Russia. It's not short of bases in the region, and its current economic situation, it doesn't make much use of its bases in the region. Secondly, Cuba will not sacrifice its relations with Russia or anyone else because the United States has accepted the folly of 50 years of embargo and ostracism and invasion and subversion and so on. Cuba will not forget who stood with it and when. So you need not worry about the relations between Cuba and Russia. I know that people start to look for conspiracies when something like this happens. Trust me, it's nothing to do with the Russian military base. The United States will not be allowed to take over Cuba. Cuba did not stand all these decades for its national independence and sovereignty, only to allow American banks to take it over. Trust me, that will not be happening. The gold-toothed emigres in Miami who are jumping up and down in fury at President Obama's decision will not be allowed to return to Cuba and reclaim the lands and the properties and the businesses that they ran away from after the success of the Cuban Revolution. This will be a slow process, no doubt, with congressional opposition, but it's a new day for the people of Cuba. The people of Cuba are celebrating it. The leadership in Cuba is celebrating it. President Raul, Comandante Fidel are all celebrating it. We should celebrate it too. Christina is in Portugal. Christina, welcome back. Go ahead.
Good evening, George.
Good evening to you. Go ahead.
What an absolutely wonderful week. The European Union, 498 for, 88 against, abstained 111.
Yeah.
We recognize Palestine.
Yes.
Jordan.
It's one after the other.
Jordan will submit a resolution at the UN to force Israel off occupied land.
Yeah.
I rather think the tide is turning, George.
We're winning, Christina. We're winning.
That's what I think. And
I knew that we would. But even if we hadn't, we'd still have been right. But I knew that we would. It's just quicker than expected.
We'll still keep on trying.
Of course. Look, the enemy never sleeps, and we can't either. I can't sleep because I've got a 5-month-old baby, but that's another matter. Christina, thanks. I'm going to Texas. Zulfikar is on the line from there. Zulfikar, welcome.
Yes, Mr. George. Hello, how are you, sir? I'm a big fan of yours. I'm doing just fine.
By the grace of God. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Sir, yes, sir. I'm going to mention two things. One is what barbaric act happened in Peshawar, Pakistan. 141 kids got slain in the name of Islam. And those same powers, Western powers, has joined hand with Al Saud, Saudi Arabian tyrants. Their unjustified preach of Islam. Islam is not. You do not call this is Islam. Zionist big lobby of Al Yahud and Al Saud has joined hands to destroy all the human lovers like yourself in the world. You are the voice of voiceless, Mr. George, and we appreciate you to come in and helping us out, because this is we only see this light in darkness, Mr. George, and God bless you, sir.
Thank you, Zulfikar. I'm not helping you out. This is wajib. This is a duty of mine. But you're absolutely right about the horrific massacre in Peshawar. Of course, the United States has massacred many more children than that with their drones and their missiles. Israel massacred many more children than that in just this last summer. Of course, if you take many summers, it's far more grave than that. But what is particularly horrific about what happened in Peshawar is that the people who carried out this massacre of Muslim children claim they were doing so in the name of Islam and were shouting the name of God as they slaughtered these innocents. Last call, Ibrahim in Kenya. Ibrahim, go ahead, sir.
Yes, please, I'm hearing you.
Go ahead.
What I can say is that it is democracy that America is bringing it to the world and claiming to be the superpower. This is just fooling the world. Democracy, democracy, it is using democracy for its own selfish gain, where there is oil, and it is not actually democracy which has got equal right for everybody. Take an example. Palestinian land has been grabbed by Israel, and America is just giving a blind eye when innocent women and children are being bombarded by Israel. And then, all of a sudden, when a country that America has gone against the interest of America, that time they will call that country with all the names, trying to pump them.
Yes, they call themselves an emperor and arrogate to themselves the right to call other men as they please. As a very wise Saint Augustine said 1,000 years ago. Ibrahim in Kenya, unfortunately, that'll have to be the last call. You can continue the discussion on Twitter at comment_PressTV. Look out for my segment, #AskGalloway. Inshallah, next week.
Hello, just comment the name and the country with that number, and just make sure about your television volume 7-0. So, can you spell your name for me? Yeah, I know. You redirect me through the phone number.